Hollywood, the Oral History is an expansive, multi-layered portrait of the American film industry built entirely from the voices of the people who lived, shaped, and survived it. Instead of a traditional author-driven narrative, Jeanine Basinger and Sam Wasson assemble thousands of interviews recorded over decades by the American Film Institute, creating a massive chorus of testimonies. Actors, directors, screenwriters, editors, cinematographers, agents, executives, publicists, stunt workers, makeup artists, costumers, animators, musicians, and set builders all speak in their own words. Together, their accounts create a living human history of Hollywood, from its early experiments to the modern age of streaming and global entertainment. The book begins with the chaotic and improvisational origins of filmmaking. Early actors describe performing dangerous stunts without safety standards, while directors recount making up film grammar on the spot. Cinematographers talk about hauling heavy, hand-cranked cameras across dusty lots, learning how to control light and movement through trial and error. Writers remember the era before screenwriting had formal rules, when stories were assembled quickly because audiences demanded new films weekly. The overall impression is of an industry born not from clear structure, but from restless creativity and limitless trial. As the story moves to the establishment of the studio era, the voices reveal a very different Hollywood, one defined by hierarchy, control, and efficiency. Actors speak about life under long-term contracts, where studios shape not only their careers, but also their public personas, personal relationships, and even behavior. Writers recall working in large office rooms, passing scripts around like assembly line parts. Directors describe both the security and the creative limitations of a system that valued consistency over experimentation. Cinematographers discuss the technical discipline needed in the era of black and white film, enormous arcs of light, and precise setups. Meanwhile, producers and executives explain the logic behind the studio machinery, balancing budgets, schedules, and stars while trying to anticipate what audiences wanted. This era's testimonies emphasize craftsmanship, discipline, and a powerful sense of belonging to a cinematic factory that produced timeless movies. As Hollywood enters the 1950s, the book's voices reflect instability. Television becomes a disruptive force. The dissolution of the studio monopoly changes the power structure. Actors describe a sudden loss of protection alongside newfound freedom. Writers remember the shift toward individualized storytelling. Producers and craftsmen talk about shrinking budgets and the pressure to adapt. The tone in these accounts is a mixture of nostalgia and anxiety, as if the old Hollywood, flawed yet familiar, is dissolving without a clear replacement in sight. When the oral histories reach the 1960s and 1970s, the atmosphere turns raw, energetic, and rebellious. This is the era of New Hollywood, and the testimonies reflect its excitement and turbulence. Young directors recall challenging older executives with bold visions, handheld cameras, location shooting, and characters who did not fit traditional moral structures. Actors describe being shaken out of old performance habits by directors who demanded realism, spontaneity, and emotional vulnerability. Editors, cinematographers, and designers remember the thrill of working with smaller teams, looser rules, and more creative autonomy. At the same time, many speak candidly about the chaos: inconsistent schedules, limited finances, egos clashing on set, and the unpredictable results of an industry in ideological transition. These voices together paint a portrait of an era both wildly creative and fundamentally unstable. As the narrative moves into the blockbuster era of the late 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, the testimonies describe a shift towards spectacle, corporate management, and marketing-driven production. Directors recall the pressures of large budgets and studio oversight. Producers describe negotiating power with talent agencies that grew increasingly influential. Actors discuss the rise of massive global audiences and the new expectations placed on stars to carry franchises rather than individual films. Special effects artists and visual effects pioneers recount how technology transformed the industry's possibilities, turning imagination into photorealistic images, but also demanding constant adaptation and rapid learning. Editors and cinematographers reflect on the transition from analog to digital, describing both the liberation of new tools and the anxiety of abandoning long-practiced crafts. These accounts show Hollywood becoming bigger, louder, more corporate, and more global. Throughout the book, one theme appears again and again: the emotional reality of surviving Hollywood. Actors talk openly about insecurity, fear of fading relevance, and the loneliness behind glamour. Writers describe the invisibility of their work and the frustration of having scripts rewritten by committee. Editors discuss spending months shaping performances only to see their contributions overlooked. Stunt workers share stories of injury and dedication, proud of their craft yet aware of their lack of recognition. Women across departments share painful testimonies about systemic sexism, fewer opportunities, lower pay, and constant battles for respect. Immigrant and minority workers describe both marginalization and the sense of community they found on sets. These stories humanize the industry, showing that below the surface of fame lies a world defined by vulnerability, resilience, and endurance. Another recurring thread is the collaborative nature of filmmaking. Nearly every voice emphasizes that movies are never the work of one person. Directors praise the unnoticed brilliance of decorators and camera operators. Actors acknowledge that editors shape performances. Costumers explain the psychological power clothing has on actors. Makeup artists recall calming anxious performers before shoots. This democratic spirit is one of the book's most powerful strengths. It restores credit to the many hands that make filmmaking possible. Technological change is another major motif. Early crew members describe the leap from silent film to sound. Others recall the shift to color, the arrival of widescreen formats, the introduction of Steadicam, the expansion of Dolby Sound, the transition from practical effects to CGI, and eventually the takeover of digital filmmaking and animation. Each innovation brought new possibilities, but also demanded that workers reinvent themselves. Many interviewees express both excitement and exhaustion at constantly adapting to an industry that evolves faster than any individual career. The book also explores the contradiction of Hollywood mythology. Because the book is built from oral testimonies, it contains contradictions. One actor might remember a director as compassionate and nurturing, while a producer recalls the same person as tyrannical. Writers disagree on whether studios destroyed creativity or made it possible. Some describe Hollywood as a family, others describe it as a battlefield. These contradictions create one of the book's greatest insights. There is no single Hollywood story. The truth lies in the tension between memories, personalities, and experiences. In later sections, the testimonies reflect the digital age, streaming services, international box office demands, algorithmic decision-making, and franchise logic. Younger filmmakers describe entering a fiercely competitive industry where content is abundant but attention is scarce. Veterans express concern but also admiration for new generations who continue chasing the dream despite shifting economics. Many voices insist that one thing remains constant: storytelling. No matter how technology or business changes, Hollywood continues to attract people driven by the desire to communicate emotions, ideas, and human experiences on screen. Ultimately, Hollywood, the oral history, stands not simply as a collection of interviews, but as a living chronicle of an industry's soul. It captures the dreams, disappointments, compromises, triumphs, failures, and countless reinventions that define Hollywood. By presenting voices from every corner of filmmaking, famous and anonymous alike, it reveals an industry built on collaboration, conflict, ambition, innovation, sacrifice, and a deep belief in the power of cinema. Basinger and Wasson offer readers not a single story, but a mosaic of human perspectives, preserving a century of memories that collectively form the most complete portrait of Hollywood ever assembled.